I really wanted to talk about quarterbacks and recruiting today, but conference realignment giveth, conference realignment taketh away, and somebody is bold-faced lying to you purposely on a daily basis.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you for stopping by to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You can find me on Twitter at AllDayOState. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms as well as YouTube. And we are back with another Big 12 Mafia Monday. Nathan, how are you feeling today, brother, man?
I'm doing good. Had a good weekend. The weather's finally turned here in Utah, so we actually got some sunny weather. It's not snowing or raining anymore. So, it was a good weekend.
Hopefully we've turned the corner and we can start matriculating into some semblance of summer. That would be nice.
Right.
It would be very, very nice. All right, man. So we're just going to get right into it. You saw the numbers, right, that just came out a couple days ago in regards to the total revenue share. And if you noticed, obviously Big Ten was number one with right around $860 million. And then obviously the SEC was a little while under that. And then if you look at all the publications out there, the national quote unquote media that is completely unbiased, you're seeing people pump up and down from coast to coast that the Big 12 is in last place in total revenue.
Right.
And then some people are accusing Big 12 media of lying to our fan base every day. I've been told multiple times today, we need to stop presenting this fallacy that the Big 12 is in a good position. We need to stop presenting information that shows that the Big 12 is in a really good footing. We need to stop producing evidence that indicates the Big 12 is the third conference by a mile. Yet here we are. And this fun little thing called mathematics, right? I went to school for kids can't read good, but I can count a little bit. And the math ain't math in there, right? Because when you divide it up by school, the Big 12 actually comes in third place by quite a bit, right? I think we're 44.6 million per school.
Right.
And then the ACC, I think, is, what was it, 37 or 38.9?
38, I think, yeah.
And then the PAC at the very bottom, where they belong, is just under 37 million per school, right?
Right.
And then the most ironic thing to me that people seem to just gloss over, can you tell me any other conference anywhere at any point in time that ended up gaining more money when they lose their blue blood programs? How does this happen?
Well, it happens because you pick up the best four available, and they actually contribute substantively, I can't say that word, for the league. So the Big 12 actually is a net gain versus when you normally add from G5, let's just count that. These are schools that can't get their own media deals, that have a really hard time drawing. Their attendance isn't good. Look at our attendance in the Big 12. As an average, it's like second highest behind the SEC. So it's not an attendance issue. It's not a visibility issue. It really comes down to the dollar amounts per capita. Big 12 is third. If you go on gross, which doesn't account for number of teams or anything like that, then the number is the last one. But that's not how math works when you're dealing with averages. So I think people in Big 12 country know the difference. And I just want to make a real quick comment about people telling you what you should or shouldn't be reporting on. For one thing, we're analyzers, right? We take other people's story, and very rarely will we break news. Normally, we're the ones that are just sort of doing editorials and our own perceptions and opinions. And nobody should be able to say anything like that. And it's ridiculous to have anybody from any other conference telling you, or for that matter, anybody else in the Big 12, what they should be or should not be noting. It's really disingenuous, and honestly, in trying to steer the narrative, they're honestly trying to steal information from the people who think it's important.
Well, I'm actually very, 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 very glad you went there, because it is odd, right? I understand getting advice, right? But I compared it the other day, or my buddies Jason and Trent compared it to, like, when you look at the CSI type of TV shows and you see the pins with the ropes that are going everywhere to try to track somebody down. That is precisely what it's like for every single one of us in this industry, right? You take a conversation with a player, you take a conversation with a coach, you take a conversation with a previous player, you look at some news articles, you look at some interviews, you look at some sideline reporting, and then you talk to a couple sources. And by doing so, that's how you can kind of piece together the information. And then some of it makes sense, right? When you tie all this stuff together, and then the head coach says something in a meeting about certain players not living up to X, Y, and Z, then it makes sense, right? Oh, now I know what players he's talking about. Oh, now I kind of know what's going on. So it's like that for everybody everywhere, right? And then the more you're in the game, the more credibility you gain, the more sources you get. This is just common sense. But that's the irony here, brother. It seems like more people in life should be permanently using condoms because common sense is no longer common. I do not get it. I don't understand what is happening. Like, you just look at the basics of it. The Big 12, from a numbers game, is doing better than most everybody else. The Big 12, from a availability game, doing more than most everybody else. Right now, what Brett Yormark's trying to do with the national branding, right, going to Mexico, all that fun jazz, it shows that the Big 12 has a lot of strength. So my question is, why are people, because that's the thing, man, there's people out on the West Coast that have far more sources than I do.
Right.
So they have to know some of the same things we do. They have to. Like, there is no physical possible way that some of these guys are this purposely naive. I don't get it, man. What do people gain by spreading a bunch of misinformation on purpose while condemning other conferences for doing the quote unquote same thing? What is there to gain, man?
Well, it's an agenda, obviously, and they're political agendas. Even though it's college athletics, it's all political. It's who you know and what you feel confident in putting out into the world. But at the end of the day, when you have these disinformation campaigns, like you mentioned, goes back to yellow journalism in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where you get a story that you're pushing an agenda, you turn around and all you do is cover that side of the story. There's no fair balance there at all. And I think everybody just needs to admit that nobody is the single source of truth. And you could be told polar opposite things from two different people on the same piece of information. It's up to you then to make the editorial choice. Which story am I going to believe? And then try to find people that'll back up that side. If you get 3-4 contacts with the same piece of information, now all of a sudden it's not a narrative you're spinning, it's a narrative that the data you've been able to track down is spinning. It's ridiculous when you have Greg Flugar has very specific contacts all over, and he stitches together a narrative, and people would disagree with it. That's fine. Greg isn't trying to claim he's the New York Times, right? He's under no requirement to do any sort of editorializing with truth backup or anything. He doesn't have to generate that story. He just has to repeat what he's heard in the past and decide, is this something that I'm going to sit behind, or if I'm going to take the polar opposite view and say, hey, look, I've heard this, but I really am thinking something else, and this is the reason why.
You know what, Nathan? I knew that I was going to be a little bit fired up today, but I am greatly appreciative of your voice inflection today. You brought a little fire for this episode too, and I love you for it. Real quick, have you ever tried Built Bar, my guy?
No, I have not, actually.
So, look, like, legitimately speaking, right? Obviously, you get paid sponsors and things of that nature, and typically they'll send you scripts and stuff to try to go over. But there's been a couple sponsors, man, that I have to admit have not only backed their product, but done it in a bold way by like, hey, I'm going to give you this and you're going to talk about it. No script, no unnecessary added fluff. And I'm telling you, man, Birddogs is legit. Built Bar's been legit from the moment that I got the job. Matter of fact, I actually thoroughly do enjoy. I get a lot of DMs from people talking about Built Bar. Like, to me, that's cool, right?
Right.
Do I get directly compensated? No, I don't. But the product is actually that flippin' fracking good. So if you haven't tried it, we've made it easy for everybody. It used to be you had to get, everything from built.com. You still can, and you can use promo code LOCKEDON15 to get yourself 15% off. But we've simplified it. You can go to Walmart, grab yourself a 4-bar box, or if bulk is your cup of taters, you can go to Sam's Club and get yourself a 13-bar box. And we're talking churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. The flavors are endless. The possibilities are amazing. With 17 grams of protein, right, which is a lot for a little bar. Only 4 grams of sugar and only 130 calories, and it's covered in 100% real chocolate. Tell your people, man, Built Bar is the bee's knees. All right, brother, man.
I'll pass that on, Cody.
All right, man. Well, no, legit. Like, so when we go to like baseball tournaments and stuff, I'm a huge gummy bear addict. Okay, I'll admit it. But now we've been adding Built Bars to when we go to baseball tournaments and stuff, and they're very, very beneficial. The baseball team, the entire high school baseball team, feels like they need to grab some out of my trunk. I don't know why that happens, but you know what? It means something's working out right. Okay.
Right. Of course. Those are the best products to get behind, are the ones that you have a personal testimonial about.
Correct. Yeah. 100%, man. It's a big deal when somebody's willing to back themselves and say, basically, I'm here to prove my legitimacy. Speaking of proving legitimacy, I'm new to this game, right? I've only been doing this for I'm on 6 months now, right?
Okay.
And I know you're pretty new to this game to some degree as well.
Right.
Maybe somebody can let us know in the comments, but do I have this whole industry completely ace backwards? I thought that if you put out legitimate stuff that's verifiable, it will help your credibility, right? When you put out information that ends up being legitimate and accurate, it does nothing but help your brand, help your credibility. Which is good, because that's typically how you make more money, honey, is when you have more people. So if I'm an O State fan, and let's say I start putting out information that is 100% inaccurate, and it's statistically not even close to relevancy, I would assume that people would stop listening to me.
All right, your credibility would completely fall through the floor. Absolutely.
So, I mean, do I have this backwards? Like, should I start telling my people stuff that I know is not true, and just hoping that I continue to expand? It just, dude, it blows my mind.
Well, look, at the end of the day, what's always been assumed in journalism is that there are two sides to every story, right? In fact, most stories have 50 different sides. And I just keep pointing back to, you can have two different people that believe polar opposite things about the same topic and both be technically right, because there's so many facets to these facts that are out there that both of these people would be hooked to a lie detector and they would be telling the truth. Nothing could be proven that they were saying anything wrong, but the data is being interpreted differently, because that's what humans do. They take what they've been from external sources, they collect and sort the data, then they turn around and they decide, I'm going to make a decision on this, and this is what I'm going to believe, or an action I'm going to take. And unfortunately, especially on Twitter, and even with shows on YouTube, if you have people that are talking about facts, but they're not backing them up with sources, that's completely different than you coming on your show, having a guest talk about a topic, and then you guys both talk about something and think that you believe something, right? Because at the end of the day, the thing that is a fact that can be sussed out is usually by a journalist. Well, unfortunately, nowadays, in this era of fake news, you can have polar opposite, like, let's just take this latest story that came out the other day. You have a couple of very valuable journalists from different companies come out and say polar opposite things about the same topic. and people don't know don't know who to trust. They're
Right.
thinking, well, who do I believe, this guy or do I believe this guy? They've both been in the industry 30 years, so
Right.
who's to say I should believe either one of them? That's where we have to make up our own minds and not rely on the journalists to do the work for you. You actually go out and find other data sources yourself to then come up with an educated opinion.
Man, it's just, I don't know. I really don't get it. I really do. And now you're hearing from the ACC side of things, right? I got several
Right.
comments, and I know some of those same individuals will most likely be commenting in this video. So yes, this is for you. I'm hearing conversations about how the Big 12 might be lucky to get Fresno State and Boise State. And I actually, dude, I like Memphis. I'm not gonna lie. I thought Memphis was a pretty good fit over Houston, but I understand Houston brought the Fertitta money, and the Fertitta money's kind of like Boone Pickens money. It's a real
Right.
deal.
It's
And
true.
Memphis
That's true.
doesn't have that, right? So
Right.
so Houston got in over Memphis. But this conversation, and you're hearing from both sides. You're hearing from ACC people and Pac-12 people still to this day, right now, this very minute. Yeah, you might be lucky to get Fresno State. Like, I don't, dude, I understand people have opinions. I myself am pretty opinionated, and I don't mind getting fairly loud about things because I researched it.
Right.
But I just, the disillusionment it's very frustrating to me personally. But at the
Well,
end of the day, what matters is the truth, right?
yeah.
And none of us know exactly what's going to happen until it
Right.
happens. But
Right.
I would be willing to bet this job that the Big 12 has far more future viability than the Pac-12 or ACC, point blank, period. Like, I
Right.
just,
Well, and it's not debatable because at the end of the day, the Big 12 is contiguous, almost coast to coast, and frankly, they have more things in common than apart. There are a couple brands that stand out that potentially could get poached for an SEC or a Big
right.
10,
Yeah.
but nobody's poaching to the ACC. Nobody's
Correct.
poaching to the Pac-12, right? Those though they still have valuable schools that could go to any conference. And as long as that's the case, they're going to be a weak link, both of them. I don't know who the people are you're mentioning. In other words, what school they represent, but some schools in the ACC have every incentive to blow the thing up, and then you have other
100%.
schools that want to hold on with grim death, right? They're a Wake Forest, for instance, not to pile on Wake Forest, but they're a brand that really isn't coveted by the Big Ten or the SEC. So they're like, well, we don't want to go anywhere. We're happy with the ACC. We want to be associated with Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah.
Don't chew us up and spit us out. The Pac-12, we already know that story. And so at the end of the day, unless something really crazy happens, like the ACC and Pac-10 merge, I don't see a way that they're able to stay viable as contiguous conferences as long as the Big 12 is there as an available option, and these other schools aren't going to get poached away to these other conferences very soon.
And another frustrating thing for me is most of the Big 12 media punditry that I can find, we're all being pretty realistic, right? I don't see anybody out there carrying the flag of we're going to get Clemson, we're going to get Florida State, we're going
Right.
to get Oregon. I don't see any Pac-12 punditry doing that whatsoever. Like, that's another thing that's frustrating is we're pretty realistic. We understand that there are teams that punch above the Big 12's weight. We get that.
Right. Right.
But I mean, Miami, like, are they probably above the Big 12's weight? Well, likely. But when you look at everything that applies to the factors that determine this realignment, Miami's not out of the equation. 100% not out of the equation.
No, in fact, there's number of ways you can slice Pac-12 and ACC schools up, wherein the only thing that really is going to restrict what happens next is the number of schools that these big conferences decide to size up to. If they both go to 24, let's just say nightmare scenario is both the Big 10 and the SEC go to 24 schools, then pretty much everything in the middle will get filtered out, and there's going to be a lot of good schools, 12 to 16 tier 1 schools that are going to get cut out just because there's not enough seats at the table, right? And you can end up with two conferences. But because of legal reasons, because the money is drying up in athletics. In broadcasting, it's almost non-existent, especially according to things like ESPN are saying, we're kind of out again on the Pac-12. I'm not sure
Yeah.
they were ever back in.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the only way that nightmare scenario happens is if they go to 24 between them. That gives you to 48 schools, and they're able to do the pick of the litter for both. But the SEC, not so much the Big Ten, but the SEC has come out and said, we're good. 16 even. They've said, we're good. And yeah, if Clemson and Florida State were to fall to us, or UNC, yeah, maybe we'll go to 18. But they don't want to go any bigger because the pie just gets whittled down that much further, as we're seeing with the Big Ten contract now that wasn't finally ratified, which means there's still some balls in the air on that.
Absolutely. Well, and the Big 12 is in a good spot simply because of the pro rata clause. We're the
Right.
only one, we're the
Right.
only conference that has that clause that says you add more Power 5 teams and you do get more money.
That's
and if we
right.
were to add a San Diego State instead of a Utah, it doesn't automatically mean we get less money, right? Just because we added a G5.
Right.
In our contract, it states if you add a G5, there has to be a meeting to decide whether they're worth the same weight. Yeah. And in the broad scheme of things, I don't know that it's going to matter. Now, you mentioned the 2014 super conferences. Did you see what the Big Ten AD was saying over the weekend in regards to that?
Yeah. From Nebraska, I did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what he said was factual and interesting. He said in the next year or two, there will be more conference realignment. That's a fact.
That's right.
That's
right.
It's going to happen.
Right.
Now, all of us in the Big 12 country, we feel like it's inevitable that the next big shift will involve the Big 12.
Right.
But the 2014 Super League, we've heard that multiple times, right?
Yeah.
Okay, a few times. We've also heard previously that somebody like a Greg Sankey could easily see the NCAA becoming obsolete and them having their own governing body.
Right.
I think that's an inevitability. The only thing that I think I differ on is because you said the revenue, the quality of teams, the landscape of the just the pageantry alone of what college football offers. I think 42 teams is too small of a pie.
Well,
There's
think about it.
How many lawsuits? 65?
Cody, how many lawsuits would happen if you have a school like let's just get crazy and say that for some reason no, I don't want to use them as an example. Let me talk about, well, yeah, fine, Utah. Say Utah got left out, right? And they weren't in they weren't in the 48 is what we're talking about. 48 schools that are in the really premier tier. Utah could get together with BYU, Oregon State, Wake Forest, every school that's been playing for 100 years in big boy football, and they could say, you can't do this. Yep. We're talking about education, right? And this is the biggest thing. Legal challenges would show up because all these schools that were left out would immediately go in and sue, hey, you guys are taking federal dollars. You guys are an entity tied to a school. You're not a semi-pro league. You cannot take and exclude everybody else. And that's bottom line, because eventually what that would mean is the 133 teams that are currently playing Division I football, you'd be down to 48. So less than half of that number, in fact, a third that number would be the teams that are actually playing in the upper tier. I just don't see it. Maybe in 20 years, but it would take a complete restructuring of the way the NC2A and all the schools operate in their leagues. It doesn't make any sense.
Man, I've been either playing, coaching, or covering this wonderful game long enough to know that after about 65 teams, like legitimately, you do see a little bit of a drop off after that. And it's always been that.
But that's half though, right? That's not a third. That's a full half of the number, which I think you could definitely make a claim that is reasonable. But to just say 48 is only a third of those schools. And when you compare Rutgers to Utah or Rutgers to BYU, who deserves to be playing big boy football before Rutgers? Or let's be really unkind and say Illinois and Indiana and Vanderbilt. I mean, the list just goes on and on. I'm telling you, it's a dream for the media to talk about because it'll get clicks to the end of time. But my personal opinion is I don't see how that ever happens in the next, let's say, 20 years.
Yeah, I just from a financial perspective, I don't see because again, this is all about money. Unfortunately, that's what it is. This has
Right.
now become a business to not only these young men, but also the presidents and the coaches and the ADs and the recruiter, everybody, right? It's a more of a business now than it ever has been before.
Right.
And when you're looking at it from a business perspective, a lot of this is just it's complete nonsense. It's just complete nonsense. And yeah, man.
Well, it's
Again,
good.
like I said,
It's
it
good
blows my mind.
clicks though, right? We enjoy talking about it, and
Yeah.
that's what fans have done till forever. And I think we should be able to continue to do that. It is fun, and I don't have any problem with people talking about it or anything. But you don't hear you or I saying and taking that the next step and saying, if you're not talking about the 48 team final playoff, you're going against the grain. Or a Pac-12 guy that says you're talking about our league bad. Quit doing that. Quit being mean. I mean, stuff like that is asinine. One, two, they don't have a problem piling on the Big 12 if the Big 12 was down, which they were in the recent past, and we're throwing parties saying, "Sorry, you don't deserve to be in our club." Now the roles are reversed. All of a sudden, it's you don't want those schools anyway because they suck. You don't want Arizona. You don't want Colorado. They're the worst of us. Go ahead and take them, and we'll backfill with Tulane and whoever knows. And it makes no sense. But that's all they have at this point, right? ESPN is on and off, on and off. And NBC Universal, come on, where's that money coming from? They've already been sort of stiffed by the Big Ten. You think they're going to want to turn around and throw money at a dying Pac-12? I just don't see it.
Well, and you're also hearing the conversation of the ACC, the Magnificent Seven, the Great Eight, whatever you want to
Right.
call them, could contractually start their own conference, which is true. That
Right.
actually can happen. But the fact that people are pretending it's a viable option is ridiculous because right now there is no way in God's purple earth that ESPN wants to renegotiate the contract they have. They have a sweetheart deal.
They do. They don't want to pay more money what they can
No.
get for cheap. No.
No. And on top of that, if let's say 8 teams from the ACC split off and made their own conference, if the ACC and the Pac-12 both are currently having some issues with TV revenue negotiations, what makes them think that if they cut the ACC in half, then ESPN and Fox and linear is going to be like, oh, well, since you left the ACC, let's sit down and talk.
I think the thinking is I think the thinking is though, Cody, is you cut off the dead meat at 8 teams. Let's say the number is 8 that decide they want to have their own league, and conceivably that would let the Pac-12 schools that want to just be the top 6 or top 8 to get rid of the schools they don't want, which are right now, we all know it's Washington State and Oregon State. So it would give them an excuse to take those brands off, which then conceivably could buoy their value because less is more. So at the end of the day, there is some logic to their thinking. I just think that the whole idea that, for instance, let's say the Pac-12 is going to blow up and they're going to join with the ACC, these other 8 teams that have gone away, and they're also going to keep Oregon State and Washington State intact. I don't believe it because it would defeat the purpose. For them to stay on after they just got rid of Wake Forest and whoever else is on that end that they want to get rid of, they're going to want to now start a league and have the other bottom dwellers, conceivable bottom dwellers out of the Pac-12. Come on, that doesn't make any sense. So they're selling loyalty, right? Pac-10 is loyal. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to blow the thing up. We're going to drop the 2 least valuable schools, and we're going to join up with the other most powerful schools from the ACC. The whole thing, if that happens, that's true, then you got lies going all over, and people are honestly not only being lied to, but they're kind of sleepwalking, not trying to control their own destiny.
I absolutely love it, brother, man. I really do. And you know what? I love the full circle here because, again, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Somebody somewhere is lying to you. If you're listening to this, somewhere somebody is bold-faced lying to you. It's either us in the Big 12, people in the Pac-12, or people in the ACC. There's no in between, right? Like you said, you can have completely different views, but at the end of the day, we will all find out soon enough, right?
Right.
If we find out in the next 2 years that the Pac-12 is losing 4 teams, then then you know the answer to that question. Same goes for ACC. If you find out in the next year or two that the ACC is in fact falling apart, then again, you have your answer. But on the flip side of that, right, same goes. If all of a sudden the Big 12 implodes and you start seeing Big 12 teams leave for other conferences,
Right.
then that means that I lied to your face. It's going to be one of the two, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't agree with that. You're not lying. You're not going out of your way to spin a narrative that is the exact opposite of somebody else's narrative, and you're doing it on purpose because you're not a nice person. That's not what your intent is. If you end up saying stuff that turns out being wrong, say, "Oh, sorry, got it wrong. Turn the page and let's move on." You're not you personally are not going to be held accountable to what happens in an athletic conference in the United States that everybody has an opinion about. And honestly, again, just throw in the Big Ten and what happened over the weekend. We now find out what has been reported for the last 11 months isn't true, that the contract still hadn't been signed and all the dates and times for late season football games hadn't been settled. In fact, there are some schools now in the Big Ten saying, hey, we were lied to. There's no way like an Ohio State is going to play late Saturday game in November in at USC. They're not going to do that because all their people are in bed. They want to play daytime games, and they want to be playing in times that are most appreciative for the things they want. They could care less about the schools they're playing against.
Yep.
So are all the people that reported on the media deal for the Big Ten, have they been lying all this time? No, there was part of the story that was underreported that is again being raised up again. But that doesn't mean that people, when they've been talking about it all along, it's been sort of a codified message that they're sending out, sort of per a formula.
Well, you're a very nice individual. I could learn some nicety from you. I personally, I'm not hearing anything positive about the Pac-12 situation. So I would bet my car, I would bet my house, and I'd bet my $60,000 prosthetic leg that the Big 12 adds more teams before the Pac-12 or anybody else has any viability left.
I think you're right. I mean, it at this point, and I continue to use Utah because they put themselves out there as the biggest advocate for the Pac-12. I would hazard a guess that means that they'd had the biggest lies told to them this entire time. They're the advocates, so much so that they're ahead of the Oregons and Washingtons and Stanfords and Cals, the blue bloods that are in the conference, and Utah's been doing the sales work for them. Why is that? Because they knew by putting Utah out, if it ended up blowing up, all they would do was blame Utah. They'd be like, "Hey man, we weren't out there championing this thing every time. We thought the conference could blow up." Meanwhile, Utah's holding the bag. So, and I've said this for about 2 weeks now, they're not dumb up on the hill in Salt Lake, and it would not surprise me if they're starting to look around and realize Washington, Oregon, Cal, and Stanford do not have their backs. Even if Stanford continues to hold out and doesn't want to share their education and research dollars and resources with, say, Utah, are they going to be any worse for the wear? Because at the end of the day, there's a big rumor right now that says if Notre Dame joins tomorrow to the Big Ten, they'll bring Stanford with them. It won't be Oregon, and it won't be Washington even. So so now if the standard bearer for education almost in the country is the one that you've been hitching to their coattails, trying to scoop up all the stuff that they drop, and you want to get their scraps, is all of a sudden gone. Now there is no loyalty, and I think it's being proved out that what the people from the Big 12 have been saying since July is that these schools have had their eye out, and now's the time for them to get a little more pragmatism and say, we need to look after ourselves, because it doesn't seem to me like anybody's got their back.
I love it, man. Well, before we skedaddle on out of here, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
If you're Brett Yormark, who are the 4 teams you are inviting tomorrow?
Who do I have access? Do I have access to Oregon and Washington?
Yeah.
Okay, then it's Oregon, Washington, and it's Utah and Arizona State.
Okay. I feel like that is a very politically correct answer on your part.
It's not. I honestly believe it. I think the whole league would be helped by having Utah in the league.
I would, if I'm Brett Yormark tomorrow, I offer Arizona, Colorado, Louisville, and probably Miami.
You were talking about ACC as well. I'm sorry. I
All
thought
over
we were
the
just
country.
talking about Pac-12. All over the country, you could get anybody in those two leagues.
Yeah.
Okay, I would do
Well,
Oregon, Washington.
other than the obvious, like we're not getting Florida State, we're not getting Clemson. You know what I mean?
Okay, so then I would definitely take Oregon and Washington. And we need 2 travel partners for West Virginia to make Coos happy. So
There you go.
it could be any Pitt. Pitt
I
would
like
be
Pitt.
huge. And then from what I understand, and I'm not from that part of the country, I'm only thinking of what I know in history. I think Louisville's close, right? North Carolina
And I'm
would
pretty
be a
sure
steal.
West Virginia and Virginia Tech, they don't like
Right.
each other very much.
But if you have a choice between Virginia Tech and UNC,
Oh yeah, I'm taking
you
North
have
Carolina.
to take North Carolina.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to assume. In fact, I heard somebody say last week that North Carolina's got an open invite already to the Big Ten. Now that may or may not be a huge rumor, but it stands to reason because they're very coveted. So
Yeah, I've never, again, being fairly realistic, I've never considered North Carolina as much of a Big 12 possibility. I mean, I guess it is, but I feel like Miami would be an easier get than North Carolina for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's Pitt and Miami then. If we have a chance to get in Florida and take Miami, I would take it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good way to.
I'd jump at it, actually.
I'm sure UCF fans would be so excited.
Hey, wait a second. I've been told nothing for the last year that UCF's going to beat them all anyway.
Yeah.
With the more money that they're getting from the Big 12 already, that they're planning on passing Florida, and they're passing on Florida State.
I will be honest. I know in the last like 3 months alone, it may be longer than that, but I've heard from UCF fans that they've beat like Florida, Florida State, Miami, everybody in Florida over the last couple of years in multiple sports. So UCF, you know what I mean? They're nipping on the heels. So I mean, I'm a fan.
They're just not. Tampa's not very sexy,
right? Gotcha.
I mean, if you could go to Miami or Tampa, I think most people would take Miami. But.
All right, brother, man. Well, this is another Big 12 Mafia Mondays. Everybody make sure that you go check out Nathan Bomber Brown, Big 12 Mafia. He does a lot of stuff. What's it, the Unholy Wars?
The Unholy, it is. It's the Holy Rivals.
Oh, okay.
It's the Holy War is the event. That's Utah BYU.
Oh, I knew about the Holy War. But,
yeah. The Holy Rivals is the site I created with the Wild Ute. And we're doing a couple shows a week. He's fantastic.
I know, man. Shout out to that guy. I wish 85% of the Utah fan base was as reasonable as understanding as that gentleman.
I like to think like I discovered him.
There you go.
Since we started doing the show, he's got nothing but props from everybody. So I hope that's because of me.
Yeah, well, he called in. I mean, I didn't know he was. But he called in when I was on the Mark Rogers show, and he had a lot of really cool stuff to say.
Yeah, no, he's very smart. Yeah,
I dig it. Well, you know what?
I hope we get him as a league game again.
There you go. Well, you know what? Maybe twist his arm a little bit, and we'll jump on a little 3-way conversation one of these days. Other than that,
well, you could come on our show anytime.
Too easy, brother.
It's an open invitation. We do Saturday afternoons and Monday evenings.
I dig it.
So all right, brother. Open invite. You send me a message, I'll send you the link.
So you'll be on with him tonight, correct?
Yeah, we're planning on 7 Central.
Okay.
All right.
I'll see if I can't finagle some stuff around for you, brother.
Yeah, just send me a message. Let me know.
Too easy, brother, man. All right, buddy. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Say hello to Nathan. Everybody say goodbye to Mr. Nathan.
See you later, Cody. Thank you.
Later, buddy. And guys, I think that's all we got for this one. Pretty simplistic. It is what it is. As always, I love you all. God bless. Go Pokes. Hopefully we win our super regional. We got the Oregon Ducks coming to town. All right. Later, y'all. Thank you for making this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State.